In 2012, Christine Love kicked the indie game community in the balls with Analogue, a hate story. The dystopian sci-fi story managed not only to make us feel sympathy for several devils, but also cemented Love's status as a gold standard in this particular genre. When she announced a sequel to this, I said then that it wouldn't be the same as the original, and that was where it could have tripped up. Thankfully, that potential failure was avoided, and what we got was a game that stands well on its own merits. After the events of the first game, you, the unnamed researcher, are on your way back to Earth with either Hyun-Ah or Mute, the two AIs from the ship. From the ship. Either will tell you that they've uncovered a new block of data related to the events of Year Zero, the time when the ship became a monarchy and began the long road to destruction we see in Analogue, a hate story. The ship is very autocratic with a rigid social structure that is being challenged both in the public square and in the bedroom. More on that in a minute. But we see nations like this every day on the news, especially in the advent of the so-called Arab Spring and the unrest in Europe. What doubles down on this sense of realism is that what brings about this new regime isn't a violent coup one day or a sudden takeover overnight. It's slow, and the tyrants are all elected before they seize absolute power, like in fascist Italy or even Nazi Germany. The new society takes shape very early in the game, with various laws passed that promote seemingly innocent social issues, like childbirth. And no one catches onto this because the elites are too busy squabbling over position, and the common folk are too busy screwing each other to notice. As a historical buff, I could handle all the elites, but I actually lost my temper on Twitter when I realized what was happening with a particular law, and I had to sit through a log covering a homoerotic poker game. At least I think it was poker. I'm not sure the card game actually matters in this context. And it isn't the only time that sexuality is used here. Love creates a sort of canary in the coal mine with the various homosexual and heterosexual couples presented in the game to show how the ship slides into its autocratic state. It's a somber lesson on the fragility of any society and how quickly it can slip away when our own ambitions and desires cloud the bigger picture. In the face of this very heavy story, the two AIs sort of take a back seat. While Mute is more prominent in this tale as she is directly connected to the history of the ship, her story doesn't have the same impact as Hyun-Ah did in the first game. And I'm still not sure that's how you pronounce This is probably because she is a very active player in the politics of the ship and plays a direct role in the rise of the Neo-Johnson era thanks to her own greed, if that can even be considered for an AI. While Hyun-Ah was clearly an innocent victim of circumstance, unable to deal with the society she wakes up in. While I did feel sorry for Mute by the end of the game, it cannot erase the fact that she only has herself to blame for her fate. The game also updates the user interface that allows for the AI to directly interact with you this time as you go through the data logs, rather than having to click them afterwards for a reaction. This added a bit of humanity to the characters and kept things interesting with this sort of unspoken banter and connection you have with either AI. The data logs themselves can now be downloaded as blocks, which ties to a new mechanic that I frankly didn't like. The game takes place over 3 real-time days, with the time being decided by the blocks of data you pull. At the end of each day, or when you reach the limit on what data you can download, the game allows you to save, then shuts down, and you won't be able to play again for another 12 hours without using a backdoor that is starting to make its way around the internet. While I understand the reasons this was implemented, it doesn't change the fact that it takes power away from the player who may not have 3 days to invest in this game. I see it being more of a turnoff than anything, but it was an interesting attempt. I'll give Miss Love that much. Other than that, everyone on the Hate Plus team brings their A game, with Isaac Shankler writing his best score yet, and Rain not only updating the AI's look, but also providing stock photos of the historical figures involved in the game. Between that, an excellent political drama, and the demand to pay cake for Hyun-Ah, which I actually did with a little help to my everlasting shame, there's plenty in Hate Plus to sink your teeth into.